Right, I should be live now. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. There were issues with the software, or more my incompetence at this type of thing. Should be live now. Hang on a second. I think I realize where I've made one mistake. Yeah, there we go. I commissioned this for this very reason. So let's see if this is working properly now. Finally. Okay. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this live stream. This in almost, not quite impromptu, that is wrong to say, but this live stream, I was thinking of doing this subject as a normal video, but I thought, why not have a bit of fun with this, or experiment and step outside the comfort zone once in a while. So before we begin, this was something I had no intention of talking about, but it just happened. So the recent Vox Adpocalypse. The good news is none of my videos have been taken down by YouTube. None of them have been demonetized by YouTube, except for the ones which were demonetized before. So I've escaped without a scratch. Pardon me. The bad news is that for a couple of months, I didn't notice this, but there were a load of comments building up under my videos which were being put into review. I went to try and get them out of held in review in the comments manager, but alas, I couldn't, because for some reason this has been complained about since March, actually. The loads of comments which were put into spam, which weren't spam, and loads of them held in review, were just put into review and I couldn't access them. So it would say there were 180 comments under this video, which were held in spam and held in review. I'd go and try and get them out, but I couldn't actually see them, but I could see the number. So I complained on Twitter, because where else do you complain nowadays? And was hoping that YouTube would fix the problem, because apparently they had responded to another guy before who had this issue and said, don't worry, our team's on it. But on the very day of the Vox Adpocalypse, I check the held in review again to see if I can approve these comments, because I noticed that comments which were benign and weren't spam at all were just being automatically put in held in review for some reason. 1 minute it would be an approved comment, next minute it'd be thrown into held for review. And they're all gone, all deleted. So if any of you commented under my videos and you can't see your comments, it may well be because they were put into held in review for no good reason, and then deleted on the very day of the Vox Adpocalypse without my knowledge and without my consent, and I'm sorry to say, but I can't get them back. It sucks, because I actually wanted to read them, because normally the comments in held for review or in spam, if they're not spam, they actually tend to be the most interesting, is what I've discovered. But I bring this up because I am a little suspicious of YouTube now, and I'm wondering whether they're just going to delete comments willy-nilly if they just don't like them. So I will soon try to share the screen in a bit, and I've been told that it's well, sharing the screen is an easy thing, but it's technology, and I normally take a while to get round to learning all this stuff. But first, just to get through a preliminary, lovely. Get through a preliminary. We must discuss definitions, unfortunately. So I've titled the video "Fictional Revisionism," and I've really got to define it, otherwise we're going to be walking in the dark and people will be confused, to say the least. So first, it's a good place to start to consider when someone says revisionism, automatically historical revisionism comes up. And I was trying to find precise definitions for this. And the only good one was from, well, the only one I could find which actually tried to answer the query I was attempting was Wikipedia. So, yes, I know, not that great. But, so when it comes to historical revisionism, which is what everyone thinks of when you say revisionism, it's defined as in historiography. Oh, goodness. Okay, let me try again. In historiography, the term historical revisionism identifies the reinterpretation of the historical record. It usually means challenging the orthodox, established, accepted, or traditional views held by professional scholars about a historical event, introducing contrary evidence, or reinterpreting the motivations and decisions of the people involved. The revision of the historical record can reflect new discoveries of fact, evidence, and interpretation, which then provokes a revised history. In dramatic cases, revisionism involves a reversal of older moral judgments. So, according to this definition at least, historical revisionism isn't what everyone thinks of, because when someone says historical revisionism, we often think of tampering with historical artifacts or removing them. But historical revisionism is actually quite innocent by the sounds of this definition. So what's normally thought of as historical revisionism is apparently just historical negationism. Also, unfortunately, the only definition I could find was on Wikipedia. Historical negationism or denialism is an illegitimate distortion of the historical record. It is often imprecisely or intentionally incorrectly referred to as historical revisionism, but that term also denotes a legitimate academic pursuit of reinterpretation of the historical record and questioning the accepted views. In attempting to revise the past, illegitimate historical revisionism may use techniques inadmissible in proper historical discourse, such as presenting known forged documents as genuine, inventing ingenious but implausible reasons for distrusting genuine documents, ingenious but implausible reasons for distrusting genuine documents, attributing conclusions to books and sources that report the opposite, manipulating statistical series to support the given point of view, and deliberately mistranslating texts in languages other than the revisionists. So that's that, and we will go and talk about this because it's actually linked. And there is actually a term for revisionism in fiction, or fictional revisionism, but it's not the definition I'll be using. But I will go and say what it is before we move on. So revisionism in fiction is apparently properly referred to in the analysis of works of fiction. Revisionism denotes the retelling of a conventional or established narrative with significant variations which deliberately revise the view shown in the original work. For example, the film Dances with Wolves may be regarded as a revisionist Western because it portrays Native Americans sympathetically instead of as the savages of traditional Westerns. Many original works of fantasy appear to retell fairy tales in a revisionist manner. The genre of Arthurian literature includes innumerable variations from the themes of the classic tales of King Arthur. It is debatable whether any particular examples set out to create a revised view. Okay, now this is the definition I've come up with to describe this working theory, or this theory in progress, which I've come up with to help try and explain some things I've been seeing. It's a working theory, and this will be the working definition, and then we get to the fun stuff. So, fictional revisionism, as I'm defining it for the purposes of this video this live stream, and probably other videos in future, the attempt to directly modify previous creations in means more substantial than editorial correction for ideological or political purposes, or the deliberate attempt to replace fictional works, art, and media with new creations of a different nature for ideological or political purposes. Right. So now we've got the boring stuff out of the way, let's go and share screens and we will see what we can talk about. So, just a quick click. Actually, I probably should keep this tab open just so I can see the chat. Hello, guys. The librarian UU definitions. Oh, hang on a minute. Oh, an example of historical revision is Adam Tooze's The Dialogue, which reinterprets historical evidence surrounding the Allies' conduct at the end of WW1. Oh, interesting. Thanks for the tip. Thanks for the tip, Featherwax. All right, let's share screens. Please work, please work. Okay, this should just present to everyone. I'm sure this should do it. Is this working? Yikes. That looks funny. My word. Hat tip Peter Hitchens. Ah, okay. Yeah, okay. Let's go and do this then. So before we talk about fictional revisionism, we should probably talk about what's commonly referred to as historical revisionism, but apparently is just historical negationism. So this is a really interesting article, but we'll just go around to the bottom to the examples. So most of us, of course, know that Stalin killed a lot of people in his inner circle and even outside his circle. And this was before Photoshop as we know it, but this is really impressive. Just getting rid of an individual he didn't really like. And there's more down here. This was obviously someone turning a photo into a painting and cutting out the other people who were removed. And I think there's another one down here. Oh no, this is just saying that this was reshot on stage, which is normally, strangely enough, in World War II, it's normally the case that if you see a picture of someone lifting a flag over some building or something, it normally has been staged for propaganda or pictures or something. Well, there was another copy down. No, okay. Well, this one is very, very impressive, and quite chilling, because what normally happens is people say, well, it's a photograph. You can't doctor a photograph, or you couldn't doctor a photograph back then. Well, this stands against it. And the thing is, this type of thing, though, is happening today, just at a different level. So you may have noticed that I've linked 2 other videos in the comment section about, sorry, not in the comment section, the description, about blackwashing. And it's referring to this. So this is by, you won't believe this, this is by the BBC. This is by BBC Teach. And the BBC is, of course, a state-funded broadcaster in Great Britain. And by state-funded, I mean taxpayers pay for it. And it's about Boudicca and the Roman invasion, which, of course, was when a formerly allied Celtic nation in Great Britain, which was actually friendly to the Romans, decided to turn against the Romans and fight back. And this is supposed to be a picture of the Celts, but who is this guy? The Celts weren't black. This is disturbing, because it's actually aimed at children, and it is a complete lie. We don't have any evidence for this. But the other 2 videos go into more depth, so I'm not actually going to complain about it here. But you'll notice that plenty of people also think that it's inaccurate, sorry. And the comments have been disabled, presumably because the comments were pointing out the fact that this isn't accurate, and were probably bringing some very embarrassing evidence. But in our modern day and age, stuff like this, this is quite clearly historical negationism, if we're going by the definitions granted, because there isn't any evidence for this. And of course, if you try and challenge this evidence and say this work, and you say, well, I don't know if this is accurate, be prepared to be called some nasty names and stuff. But this is clearly a progressive move. So this is the type of thing we're dealing with. And I bring this up because if this is happening in what is essentially supposed to be a history documentary, then we can almost be sure that it's happening in fiction to an extent. And I'm not just talking about, and I'm not talking just about where we're putting black people in films and the stuff where they'd normally be white. I'm actually talking about something which goes far deeper than that. So let's go and put ourselves in the minds of a progressive for a moment. So imagine that you're a progressive and you don't really like, for sake of argument, Indiana Jones. You don't like the fact that Indiana Jones represents a particular masculinity, which you don't really agree with. Maybe you've read the American Psychological Association's report on manhood and masculinity and counseling men and boys, and you've decided that Indiana Jones is an example of toxic masculinity, a toxic role model, and you're anxious because people are watching this film and you don't agree with it. And you're of the opinion that you can influence society via art and creation. So, if you're a progressive in Hollywood and you've got the money, what are you going to do about it? Because you can't just take these copies. I mean, fans of Indiana Jones have the copies of the DVDs, the Blu-rays, whatever, maybe even the VHSs in their homes. You're not going to be able to collect them for burnings. You're not going to be able to get them all. And if you were to try, either you use the state as a proxy, or since you're a Hollywood millionaire or billionaire, you hire a private army to try and do this. It wouldn't go down very well. It just wouldn't work. So what can you do? I mean, maybe if you have enough influence over Hollywood and the film industry, if you have enough, maybe you can stop new copies being produced. Maybe. But people still have the old copies, and if someone just uploads the footage onto their computer or downloads it onto their computer and decides to create more copies, then you'd have bootlegs of Indiana Jones going around if there was a demand for them. So it would be really hard in this modern day and age to try and censor these films and videos. And you may be thinking, well, nobody really wants to do that. Well, the Canadians at least do. So that's the wrong one. Where has it gone? I'm ruining this presentation. Darn it. Don't tell me I forgot to put it up. Yep, I forgot to put it up. And I have just ruined a presentation. Oh, interesting comment. These copies are toxic lies, put them in the memory hole. Yeah, I forgot it. Shoot. Let me see if I can find it, actually. Darn it, Google. I don't actually like using Google Chrome for anything, but let's see if I can find it. Unplanned de facto censored in Canada? Yes. So, if you haven't heard, there is a film called Unplanned, and it came out a few months ago. And it's supposed to tell the real story of Abby Johnson, who was a director for Planned Parenthood, who saw an abortion and came to the conclusion that it was wrong. And this is her story, essentially. And of course, this film was made by Christians who are pro-life and against abortion. Now, apparently, it's been blocked in Canada. So, well, Canadian movie distributors have de facto censored the movie Unplanned from screening in theaters, cinemas. Here says the movie's producers. We have been effectively blocked from distributing the film in Canada, said producer Lisa Wheeler at an Ottawa news conference May 8th. So it's just, as I said, based on her memoirs. The two largest distributors in Canada cited content as the issue, not lack of consumer demand, Gonzelman said. And this follows on the heels of universal rejection of every Canadian distributor we approached, and whose participation is required by law in order to exhibit a film theatrically throughout much of Canada, he said. In fact, we can't even get a rating by any of the provincial film boards, since one of the mandatory items on the application for each province is for us to list our distributor. I'd like to say I'm surprised, but I'm not. So essentially, a group of progressives and pro-choice individuals in Canada just decided that they didn't want to distribute the film. And you see, they are willing. So you can imagine that if these progressives in Hollywood, for instance, had a magic wand and they could remove every single Indiana Jones film that had been made, all those toxic, evil lies, and throw them in the memory hole, they pretty much would. I mean, they would rather this film wasn't made, for instance. Really would rather that not be made. So, but here's the thing: what can you do? Because maybe you can get the distributors to ban it, but this film can still be viewed. Like, this will probably go to DVD release or something in Canada, or at least I hope. So, but the censorship route normally isn't actually that. What's the word? I've actually forgotten the word. Isn't really too viable. But here's what you can do. I made a previous video which is listed in the comments the description below, about the theory behind why this is happening. Indiana Jones is going to be a woman? ? Where I theorized that the progressives in Hollywood were influenced by an understanding of Gramsci's theory of hegemony, and that what they're trying to do when they make sequels and the like to old films which are beloved but regressive and toxic, they are trying to turn oppressive works into progressive works. And we can see this happening by and large in 3 steps. So this is how you do it if you are one of those progressives in Hollywood and you find Indiana Jones, for instance, to be a problem. So here's what you do in 3 simple steps. Step 1, you take an existing franchise, Indiana Jones in this case, and you make a new film in the franchise, but you change the qualities so that it reflects your philosophy, ideology, regardless of whether it makes any sense to do so. Actually, I'll stop sharing the screen for a moment. Step 2. When you release this new film, you have your paid critics in the media fawn over it and explain to the plebs why it is a great film and why everyone should like it. Encourage the usual cultural critics to talk about how brave, stunning, and progressive it is, and talk about how backward the original films were, in this case, the original Indiana Jones film. And step 3, when the criticism comes, and it will, declare that your fans are Russian trolls, alternate right bots, and then proclaim gravely that the fandom has turned toxic and is composed of deplorable people. Now, we've seen this before. I don't actually need to mention the film in question. But I will. I'm just talking about The Last Jedi, which followed these steps to a T, but it seems to be the way that it also happened with the new Ghostbusters film as well. Now, of course, at first glance, this wouldn't appear to be a good strategy, because let's face it, audiences roundly, for the most part, disliked the new Ghostbusters film, and The Last Jedi for being essentially disrespectful. And Rian Johnson has received it in the neck, and because he's not particularly wise and he's not particularly humble, he just called everyone man babies, trolls, and Russian bots. And from an economic side as well, it clearly looks ridiculous to follow this, for the simple reason that Han Solo bombed. People are less interested in Star Wars than ever and don't want to go and see the new film which is going to come out. Actually, forgotten the name of it. How pleasant. Ignorance is bliss. And of course, as per World Class BS's videos, no one wants to buy the new toys and merchandise. They're just rotting on the shelves. So it would appear that actually this doesn't work. But we need to consider something here. Who are the ones who are boycotting these films? Who are the ones who are deciding that they don't want to give money to this? It's adults. And this is the thing. I think that these new media, these new films, these new stories are not and these progressive sequels are not being made to persuade adults of this new worldview, but children instead. Now, with The Last Jedi, I think it was a complete failure in this regard, because I don't know any children who found it fun. I don't know any children who liked The Last Jedi. And to be honest, sitting in the cinema, I can only imagine children getting really bored, because I was getting a bit bored in the cinema. Now, so this is how the progressive Hollywood workers' modus operandi, but I do not think that the Star Wars sequels are actually attempts at fictional revisionism. I instead think that they are progressive, but they're not exactly attempts at fictional revisionism. But because in a way they can't be. They're sequels. A sequel has to build on the works that came before. It can't forget them. It'd be a bit silly if we turned on The Force Awakens and nobody knew who Luke Skywalker was, or he didn't even exist and he had just been written out of canon. That wouldn't make it a sequel. That would make it a reimagining. And Last Jedi couldn't do that, and neither could The Force Awakens. But I do actually have some examples of fictional revisionism as I've defined it. So let's go and take a look at that. So this should be working. Present to everyone. Yes. Right. So I have an example of a direct modification of an author's work. So, for those of you who don't know, there was a British children's writer called Enid Blyton. She's no longer alive, but she wrote, yes, hundreds. She did write 100 or so books for children, and her works have been revised by modern day people with modern day sensibilities. So, for instance, she wrote a series called Amelia Jane, which were a set of books set in a child's nursery. And in this children's nursery, the toys are alive and they get up to random shenanigans. And Amelia Jane is a doll in the story and is a very naughty doll who gets up to ill-advised shenanigans. Now, one of the characters in the story was a gollywog. And if no one knows, gollywogs in the early 20th century in Great Britain were toys which were supposed to represent Africans and black people, and were toys which were played with by children. Back then, nobody batted an eyelid, but today, they are considered quite offensive. And as a result of this, and a result of other things, because Enid Blyton was born in the late 1880s and was writing in the first half of the 20th century, there are plenty of other things which, to modern sensibilities, are quite distasteful to modern sensibilities, which has resulted in stuff like this. So, this was the best I could find. I'm really sorry. New editions of Amelia Jane being written and not being written, sorry, being published, and they changed the Gollywog into a toy soldier because they were worried about the backlash, and it's really hard to blame them. But it goes beyond this. So there are actually quite a few examples of this happening. So where was it exactly that I found this? So there's plenty of other things, for instance, plenty of other things which even make little sense. So apparently there were sensitive revisions. Sensitive revisions simply replaced mother and father with mum and dad, cut out words such as jolly and wizard, eliminated gay fairgrounds and queer happenings where the word's modern meanings might be distracting or shocking. Now this is jolly queer. Replacing supposedly outmoded words such as ditching peculiar for strange. And there were some other tweaks to fit modern sensibilities too. So this has happened with plenty of new editions of the books. There were some tweaks to fit modern sensibilities too. Blyton's insistence on the obligations of girls to make sandwiches has gone the way of gollywogs, and the sadistic Dame Slap in The Faraway Tree, who was reduced to reprimanding children as Dame Snap in an earlier round of Blyton reforms. George still wanted to be a boy, given that this is a major plot point in every famous 5 books. It would be difficult to excise, but less was made of the shortness of her hair. This stuff so Enid Blyton's work has undergone fictional revisionism because she was writing for a different time, and publishers are today very sensitive about this type of thing. So they have been conducting fictional revisionism on her works. Here again, where was this one? So yes, Enid Blyton has been called a xenophobe, and has in response to allegations of sexism and racism, Choron, one of the publishers, began heavily editing Blyton's works in the 1990s, removing phrases and words that could be deemed offensive. Concerns that Blyton's work could offend audiences were first raised as far back as 1960, when a publisher questioned her old-fashioned xenophobia in explaining the motives of thieves simply with the fact that they were foreign. I actually don't think that is a fair statement, but we'll let it slide. So they've done quite a lot here, actually, and it keeps going. But as it turns out, at least according to this Spectator article, the censored or the changed or fictionally revised versions didn't do very well. And again, this type, it's because they were changing stuff like this, for instance. For instance, the suggestion. There we go. The suggestion that tomboy George needed a good spanking became a good talking to, while girly Anne's assertion, "You see, I do like pretty frocks, and I love my dolls, and you can't do that if you're a boy," had its final clause removed, rendering the sentence throwaway rather than poignant. Unsurprisingly, given that all the charm had been stripped out of them, the revised editions flopped, and last week it was reported that Hatchet were reverting to the originals. The publishers conceded that the updates had proved very unpopular. To an extent, it's not surprising, because there are ardent Enid Blyton fans who dislike intensely this fictional revisionism of her work. So this is a very direct example. And you can imagine, and can you imagine trying to argue against this in the publishing industry. If you tried saying that you didn't want this to happen, it's easy to imagine that you would be deemed a secret or crypto neo-Nazi, or a secret in the closet xenophobe. And, you know, defending this stuff will get you a lot of flack. Defending the author's work from having this revisionism, it wouldn't have been an easy thing. So I can understand why publishers, initially at least, and probably will still be doing this, decided that they would try and revise the works. Now, of course, this is a very direct example, but there is a subtler way, and because this is the direct revision of fictional works, and I'd also argue that this is historical negationism as well, or historical revisionism as well, because whether people like it or not, lots of literature critics really do not like Enid Blyton or her work. But regardless of what you think of her, Enid Blyton's books have become part of the English and British fictional heritage. They are part of the heritage. So if you are changing her books here, you are actually changing part of history, which, in my opinion, is incredibly dangerous and disrespectful to the author. But there is but of course, this is a very direct example, but here is the other way, and this is where you try to replace works. And yes, so this was actually what sparked the idea for the video many months ago. When did this come out? Yes, I'm really late on the scene. This is February 8th. I'm really sorry. I was thinking about making a video of this, but yeah, decided that now would be better than before. So just don't understand. But so this reimagining of the rescue sequence from Star Wars: A New Hope. So I'm going to shout out a person in a minute, but I think it's clear to see that something is a bit off here. And that is Luke's character has changed, and so has Leia's character. Like there is a great. I'm going to do the shout out right here. So this good gentleman, Sprocket List, made an excellent video called "Film History Rewritten: Disney Star Wars Galaxy Adventures Princess Leia The Rescue Comparison," where he just compares what happens in each scene and how they have changed it from the previous video which we just came from. He does an excellent job. So right here, he does an excellent job. I can definitely go to this guy and give his video a thumbs up. So I'm not going to really go through it all, but you know, I mean, just if we just go back here, for instance, sorry, forwards, go here. Princess Leia turns from someone who was unimpressed with the rescue attempt into, I'm trying to think of the words. She's just turned into a really aggressive brute. Yes, I'm going with brute. She's been turned into a great big brute. And this is apparently considered okay. This is apparently considered to be a good revision. It actually really shocks me. I mean, imagine if the genders were reversed in this situation. We wouldn't think well of a man who acted like this. It's bizarre that someone actually wrote this, actually animated it, and thought, yeah, this character will be liked. This character will be accepted. It's absolutely bizarre. And of course, Luke is turned into a blithering buffoon. Just look at this. Look at Luke. From someone who actually, you know, maybe he didn't have a good plan, maybe they were making it up as they go along, has been turned from someone who was a bit inexperienced into a complete a complete dope. This is just it's like, and of course, it's like, who wrote that and thought, oh, everyone will like this new version of Luke we wrote? But here's the thing: we've got to ask, why is this even being made? And the best example the best reason I can think of for why, why this is being made, why they are making Star Wars Galaxy of Adventures and have changed Leia's character and Luke's character so much, is because they have an ideological vision. But then that raises another question, because why not just create new art? Why not just create a new film with your ideological vision? Well, I think yeah, pause here because that was my expression after watching this. So why is this being made? Because you could easily make, I don't know, another Star Wars based animated series with women like this, men like this, and people would still dislike it. Like, look at this glorious dislike ratio. People would still dislike it, but they wouldn't be so angry about it. I mean, why do this? Why not just create something new? I think it's quite simple, actually. I think it's quite simple. Where are my notes? There they are. So I think this has all to do with the desire to preemptively have a preemptive mental strike at children, because this is aimed for children. No adult was ever going to watch this. All adult Star Wars fans like the original trilogy. They like the original trilogy, and this is an insult to the original trilogy, because it's not needed, as stated before, and it changes everything. Well, not everything, but it changes significant parts about the characters. So it was never going to appeal to adults, but I think it's supposed to appeal to children, and I'm not just saying this because it's animated. I think this is the reason. I think the creators of this series don't want children to watch the original trilogy, the original A New Hope, and accept the ideas which both implicit and explicit contained within it, because the original Star Wars trilogy is not. You could argue it was progressive for the time, but it's not progressive by today's standards at all. And I think that the hope is that children will watch this first before they watch the original trilogy. And when they watch the original trilogy, they will be biased against it. Because in their minds, this right here is Han Solo. This is Princess Leia. And that poor guy is Chewbacca. I feel sorry for him in this scene. This is just... oh, come on. That's just not nice. Bit worse what she did to Luke, actually. I don't know, actually equal. But the point is, they will think these are the characters. These are the characters. So when they watch the original trilogy, in their minds, that won't be the originals. And they will be brought up to think that this is how men and women should interact, this is how people should work together, rather and be against the original New Hope, which is actually advertised here. Okay, Google, I'm not complaining. In essence, I do think this is a kind of preemptive strike against the original trilogy, and it's being fought in the imagination, in the minds of children who are supposed to watch this. Because it must be understood that this isn't a prequel, this isn't a sequel, this is an active reimagining of the events of the original films, which were problematic, quote unquote. And again, we know that if the creators of this particular short and the series Star Wars Galaxy of Adventures had a magic wand and could either revise all the copies of A New Hope or get rid of them entirely, they'd probably use that wand. I wouldn't trust them with such a wand if they existed. And again, I must stress that this is about children. This is about turning the minds of children against the original trilogy by making them think that this is Star Wars and putting like a barrier between them and the original trilogy. But you maybe think, well, surely this is just Star Wars. This isn't actually happening on a bigger level, right? I mean, other people aren't doing it. Well, look no further than Disney, because Disney is the one doing this. Right here, so decided not to play it in case there were problems. But we don't really need to look any further than Disney's very recent live-action Beauty and the Beast. This film is supposed to take place in 1810s France or thereabouts. Thereabouts. And there are black people in the film, and this makes no sense because at this point, alas, the slave trade was going on. The slave trade was happening. If a more realistic film were trying to be if they were trying to make a more realistic film, I'm afraid these people would be in chains and in slavery, and it wouldn't look very nice at all. But of course, it doesn't just end with it doesn't end here, unfortunately, because there he is. Because it goes beyond. It goes to sexuality. Because LeFou, I mean, some people argue that LeFou in the original animated film was a homosexual. I don't really buy that argument, but I can see why people would make that argument. But assuming that he was, it was implicit. But in this, it's explicitly shown. And then, of course, Gaston is right here. Gaston is shown to be in this film. It's hinted that he's potentially bisexual, and it's, of course, why these changes weren't necessary. In fact, this whole film wasn't necessary. Who actually asked for a live-action Beauty and the Beast? Who asked for it? No one. But it's become a vehicle for progressive ideas, and I would argue that it's also an attempt to act as a new film to replace the old one. Because the old one, again, we could argue that the old Beauty and the Beast was progressive for its time, and you can make good arguments. Again, you can make arguments for that, or you can make arguments against that. But regardless of whether it is or not, now today in this modern age, we're coming up to the second decade of this millennium. It's not considered progressive. So I think this really is actually an attempt to give a replacement of the old films. And Disney, I haven't watched the new Aladdin, but according to the amazing Lucas, who seems a forthright and honest reviewer, it went, shall we say, quote unquote, woke. So this is a thing which is still happening. And Disney's going to keep doing it with the new live action versions. They are going to become increasingly progressive, and I'm pretty sure the only reason they're being made is to put a progressive view forward. But it doesn't stop here, because yes, I somehow this news escaped me, and when I discovered it, I was surprised. This is a hot take by Cinema Blend, why a Shrek reboot is a great idea. I beg to differ on this front, but Shrek is being rebooted for no good reason, because nobody dislikes the original film. Well, people do, but it still has its fans. So, according to this is where it becomes a bit telling. So, according to the article, the overall goal of this reboot, according to Meladorandri, I think that's how I pronounce it, is to find a way to introduce this franchise to a new audience. Question, ladies and gentlemen, where have we heard this language before? I'll tell you where we've heard it before. We've heard it before when talking about. Sorry, we've heard it during the advertising of The Force Awakens. Everyone was saying, the advertising team was saying, this was Star Wars for a new generation. This was Star Wars for a new generation. And question, what did we get exactly? We got a Rey Sue, we got an inferior copy of A New Hope without the soul, and we got a hate letter to men and fans of all stripes in the form of The Last Jedi. This is the type of language which is used. It's the same lexicon. Now, I'm still hopeful that it may not contain progressive grandstanding. I hope it doesn't, this Shrek reboot. But in all honesty, what's the hopes of that? It probably will become, I don't even want to imagine it, it probably will be used as some progressive point, as some progressive work, and I don't really want to imagine it. So, this is happening in Hollywood. So, just stop sharing screen for a minute. And it's just one of those, it's just going to keep happening, unfortunately. Like, all these, I'm pretty sure that a lot of these new remakes are just being made to try and replace the films of the past which were not progressive enough. And I really think that this is probably, I think this is not a good thing, and we've certainly seen the death of creativity, because no one's making anything new in Hollywood. They're just spending time revising the old stories and making them in essence a type of propaganda, unfortunately. But pardon me. But I want to talk about something which is a bit more amusing, and which I think a rather interesting example of a rather interesting thing, because I'm not sure how to define what this person is doing. So, yeah. So I'm now going to want to talk about J.K. Rowling, because J.K. Rowling is an interesting author. I think there hasn't been an author like J.K. Rowling ever. I'm not actually sure if there has been an author quite like her. She is infamous for her tweets, and infamous for her tweets, her blog posts, and film sequels and stage adaptations, which are attempts to reinterpret prompt audiences and readers to reinterpret her works. So there was a really funny mockery of her by College Humor here. So the first two tweets here are real. These are genuine tweets. So these two are real. But the everything below number 2 is false. So this is what, and this, so there's like 2 here, 1, 2, 3. Okay, there's actually more than 6, but these are all fake tweets, and I'll tell you something, and it's really funny what happened. So people found this article, and they screenshot these tweets, the fake ones, and then they put them on other platforms without context, and people started to believe that Rowling's tweets below were real, that they were real tweets when they were actually fake and photoshopped. And it's actually fooled some people in high places. So College Humor's fake J.K. Rowling tweet accidentally made it into one of the new Philosopher's Stone books. So the fake tweet in question was, have any of the Hogwarts teachers ever dated? Of course, Sprout and Filtwick had a long-term relationship. They broke up but remained friends. Yes. So they put it in here. So 20, let's click it. Maybe it will take it. So parody in 2015 and 2017 official Hufflepuff House edition. And it said, did you know Professor Sprout had a long-term relationship with fellow teacher Professor Filtwick? Sadly, it didn't work out, but they remain friends. And Bloomsbury responded to it by saying, we are aware of this error, and it has already been corrected for reprints of relevant house editions. And at this point, it's like, whoa, how were you guys fooled by these things? And I'm going to explain why and then get on to the meat of the subject and for the reason and explain why I'm talking about J.K. Rowling in the first place. But let's have our fun here. So there's a reason why these were believed. So let's look at this one. This one's fake. If Dumbledore really is gay, is he a top or bottom? That is a fake answer. That is a that's a fake answer. But you know, I have a question, like an honest question. Is this tweet 100 miles away from this article and from this actual statement by J.K. Rowling? J.K. Rowling reveals Dumbledore and Grindelwald had an incredibly intense sexual relationship. So the relationship was incredibly intense. It was passionate and it was a love relationship. So, and is quoted as saying there was a sexual dimension to their bond right here. Although she did say, so I'm less interested in the sexual side, although I believe there is a sexual dimension to this relationship. And of course, in 2007, she casually confessed that Dumbledore was gay during a Q&A session with Harry Potter fans. So is this 100 miles away from the fake tweet? No, it's not 100 miles away. It's just not very specific. But how about this one? This is just hilarious. This one was hilarious. This one was clearly fake. Yeah, right here. Why do wizards need a toilet? Can't they just use magic? And these are the fake tweets. You go down and say wizard pipes are actually made, blah blah blah. And it's all these tweets about something, like these are fake tweets in which we hear something we don't want to hear about Cho Chang and blockage of a toilet, which we don't want to hear. And but the thing is that really 100 miles from this? So this is something as well nobody wanted to hear. The only difference between this and the fake tweet is this is real. So right here. So however, when Hogwarts plumbing became more elaborate in the 18th century, this was a rare instance of wizards copying muggles, because hitherto they simply relieved themselves wherever they stood and vanished the evidence. It's not 1,000 miles apart from the fake tweet, which is why... Sorry, this is why... dang it. There we go. This is why loads of people started believing these, because although they're fake, they are within her character. But now that I've had a laugh at J.K. Rowling's Twitter, because you can't really talk about her without laughing at her Twitter, it's kind of mandatory. I will go back to what I said about fictional revisionism. I think J.K. Rowling is involved in a soft fictional revisionism because she's not exactly trying to replace her works, and she's not directly editing her works to make them more progressive. for instance, she is involved in trying to make her works more progressive. So more recently than the Dumbledore thing, where she just kind of said, "Oh, he's a homosexual now," and people were like, "Okay, that's not mentioned in the books." This isn't mentioned in the books either. And this I actually have no idea why this was even made. What the film and the decision here. But it seems to be it's almost like she wanted to make it's almost like J.K. Rowling thought to herself one day, I want to have a Far East Asian woman character in my new film. But rather than just write one, she decides to make a Horcrux and a pet snake of Voldemort's a human in the previous. I have no idea why. I have absolutely no idea why she did this. And of course, there was much mockery. And of course, there's much mockery from individuals such as myself, and there were attacks on her for aggressives for her decision here, because it was considered to be disrespectful, and I kind of agree. And of course, another one was this, where J.K. Rowling does say, and what she says is actually true. She does say that she never described Hermione's skin color, which is absolutely true. She didn't explicitly state that. But everything in the book made her out to be Caucasian. And what's funny is this statement, this new reveal started making Harry Potter fans question everything they knew about Harry Potter. And there is this thread right here, and it's hilarious, and it's funny, but it's actually a serious attempt by Harry Potter fans to figure out, well, who is stated in canon to be which race. And it actually gets really quite thorough. Like, this is long. Where they're just where some people have been through all the books trying to get as many references as possible to figure out the races of the characters or the skin colors of the characters. And it keeps going, and it keeps going, and it keeps going. It's really, like, I'll tell you, I haven't seen this level of scrutiny put on a set of books outside of a Bible study session. This is quite thorough. Really is. I feel sorry for Harry Potter fans, actually. I really do at this stage. It's just it's funny and it isn't. But the thing is, like, everything as per this article by the Rowling Library, so I'm sure that it's a reliable source on this subject. She was originally envisioned as a white girl, because this is apparently an illustration by J.K. Rowling herself. And there's Neville Longbottom here, Ron Weasley here, Harry Potter here, Hermione here, and a guy called Gary, who was renamed to Dean Thomas. And you'll notice that he has darker skin here, and this is who Dean Thomas is in the film. This is actually excellent casting, I've got to say. He actually, this guy, he actually looks like the guy here. I think this is excellent casting. Congratulations to the casting director. You did an amazing job here. But yeah, this is an illustration made by J.K. Rowling, and it depicts an early draft of the Midnight Duel chapter, where we see Neville, Ron, Harry, Hermione, and Gary. This last one was later renamed to Dean Thomas, And as we can see, Gary Dean is darker skinned than the rest, especially Hermione, who seems to have white skin. So everyone was envisioned this way. This was how the characters were envisioned, and actually, these descriptions pretty much stayed the same in the films. So, I mean, we don't need this to prove the point, but J.K. Rowling's revisionisms to her work are quite simply unfounded and are revisions. But the funny thing is, she's not actually. But as I said, she's not editing her novels in the way people are editing Enid Blyton's novels. There we go. She's not editing her novels in the way that people are revising Enid Blyton's novels. She's not trying to make new works to replace her own books, because she hasn't written new books to try and persuade people of these new interpretations. She just makes a stage play or a set of films which don't include these characters, and then just makes some tweets later on and says, oh, you've got to interpret it this way. So she's in an odd one. I'm not quite sure how to define what she's doing. Now, it's actually interesting. J.K. Rowling, as I said, is a very interesting author. And she's a very interesting author. And again, I don't think there's been another author quite like her. And at this point, loads of people think that she's some shade of progressive. They think that J.K. Rowling is some type of progressive who is trying to push an agenda, but I don't actually think she is. I think J.K. Rowling is actually a very scared woman. I don't think these changes come from a place of political or ideological conviction. My theory is that she's a scared woman. Because thinking back to Enid Blyton, as I said, Enid Blyton's works they've been attacked for being all kinds of things, and the author has been accused of many things, and her works have been revised. And this has all happened to her because she was writing for a different time, the times changed, and so the people changed. And thing is that our society, like, there's the great meme going around saying that we're in clown world. And the reason that meme has spread so far and so wide is because we are living in clown world. What was progressive, or what was considered, acceptable 10 years ago, is considered bad today. We're living in a world where we seem to be spiraling into some kind of madness. So the thing is that J.K. Rowling's works were her first book, for instance, her first Harry Potter book was published in 1997. And the last Harry Potter book in the series, The Deathly Hallows, was printed 10 years later. So from 1997 to 2007, her books were considered progressive, they were considered politically correct, and they were considered good. I mean, nobody criticized them. But we're living in the current year, 2019, and in this current year, what was progressive or what was politically correct some years ago is no longer the same anymore. And although Rowling has not cited Enid Blyton as an influence on her work, she has to be aware of who Enid Blyton was and what's happening to her works and what has been criticised and the criticisms level at Enid Blyton. J.K. Rowling has to be aware of this. And I think that all these revisionisms, all these tweets by her, all these changes which come out of nowhere are an attempt to preserve her books from this criticism. I think that she is legitimately scared of her books being declared they're bad, they are regressive, they are toxic, whatever, and thrown to the side and not looked upon. And I think she's scared of those accusations. I think that's why she's doing it. I don't actually think it comes from an ideological or political or philosophical conviction, because if she was that way and convicted, she would have just written the books differently. And unfortunately for her, I don't think it's working. I think people who are of the progressive mindset don't trust her, and I think that this game of hers will eventually end quite badly, because what people will eventually ask for is that she either rewrite the stories or she writes new ones which are progressive. And the thing is, she keeps writing that. She keeps writing things like Dumbledore's gay on Twitter and stuff, and saying the likes. But we haven't actually seen a story by her depicting that relationship, which is probably a good thing. But I honestly don't think she's that way convicted. Okay, so time to wrap up, and there's probably some questions to answer. So basically what I've tried to discuss on this stream is a working idea to try and explain what I'm seeing and what I think we'll keep seeing. I mean, this is going to continue, obviously. So to wrap up, I came up with a definition to help to try. I came up with a definition to try and help explain the things I'm seeing, and to explain some phenomena. And the definition holds two variants of fictional revisionism. My words are making no sense. Let me revise. I've come up with a definition for fictional revisionism to help try and explain what on earth is happening in the world, in this clown world. So, when it comes to fiction. And there are two types of fictional revisionism: direct modification, which can be seen with Enid Blyton's work, replacement attempts with Star Wars Galaxy of Adventures and the new Disney live-action films, which are strategies which are aimed for children mainly, although there will likely be overlap between these two different attempts. And I just ended by saying J.K. Rowling falls in a very interesting position, because she is a very bizarre author. She's a very unique author. So hopefully this ramble and this mental and verbal spilling which is coming out of my head and the like will have been of some help to people, or at least I'm honestly happy for this to be useful food for thought. Because at this point, I'm just happy to start nice discussions, nice conversations, etc. at this stage. So I think that sums everything up. And does everything well. So I wonder if there's any interesting chats to look at. The flag at Iwo Jima was also staged. Yes, it was. Very interesting situation there. Boadicea was actually a tax rebel. This is always de-emphasized. I think it was actually. Was she? Oh, my memory. It's not as good as it was. I don't want to imagine being a progressive. Sometimes it's useful to. Yeah, sometimes it's useful to get into the minds of people to try and understand their worldview. Supposedly, the photo on Iowa. Plot thickens was not staged, but the film was admittedly staged just afterwards. Although supposedly the reenactors were the original participants, if memory serves. Howdy. Douglas Adams' Pictures of the Cathedral suddenly becomes immensely valuable. Read The Cathedral of Chelsea, the construction of whose past was foolishly extended too far into the past. I actually don't understand. Oh, another example. Roald Dahl, in particular, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, was subjected to similar editing when it came to where the Oompa Loompas came from, and that was when Dahl was still alive, I believe. Yeah, I can believe that. Hmm. All right then. Just drink some more ale. Right. Thank you all for watching and tuning in to me throwing ideas at a wall and seeing what sticks and what doesn't, and just having a good time and some fun. Thank you all for listening. I hope you all have an excellent day, and I will see you probably in another normal edited video where I have scripted everything properly and done things which are useful. I don't. Oh goodness, I really need to script these things. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Have an excellent day and stay safe. Good evening.